My daughter-in-law handed me a pen last Thursday morning and smiled like she was doing me a favor. "Just sign here, Dad," she said. "It's the best thing for everyone." The papers were from Sunridge Senior Living in Grapevine, Texas, a nursing home. My home, the one I built my life in for 31 years, was sitting right behind me, and she was asking me to sign it away. I didn't say a word, I just looked at the pen. That was Thursday. By Saturday morning, my son and his wife were sitting at my kitchen table expecting a celebration breakfast. Eggs, sausage, fresh coffee, biscuits. My son leaned back in his chair, looked around the house like he was already measuring for new furniture, and said, "See, I knew you'd come around, Pop, you always do." That's when the doorbell rang. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. Let me tell you who I am and how the family I spent my whole life building almost took everything from me. My name is Eugene Perkins. Everyone calls me Gene. No, wait, everyone used to call me Gene. My wife Patricia called me that for 42 years, right up until she passed. Now mostly people just call me Dad or Mr. Perkins, depending on whether they want something from me. I'm 68 years old. I live in Garland, Texas, in a house I bought in 1993 with Patricia, when our son was 3 years old and the world still made sense. 3 bedrooms, a big backyard, a detached workshop where I spent more hours than I can count. I was an electrician for 35 years. Commercial, industrial, the kind of work that requires you to think 3 steps ahead or you don't go home. Retired at 63. Patricia was supposed to retire the same year. She was a school librarian. Loved it more than any job I've ever seen a person love anything. She died 14 months before any of this happened. Pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to gone. I didn't have time to prepare. I don't think you ever do. Our son, I'll call him my son because that's what he is, even when he makes it hard to remember, is 38. His wife, my daughter-in-law, is 35. They've been married 6 years. They live in Frisco, about 40 minutes north. Nice neighborhood, nice house, nice car payments they can't quite manage. For the first year after Patricia died, my son called every Sunday, came by once a month. It wasn't enough, but it was something, and I told myself that was normal. Young people have their own lives. I didn't want to be a burden. That word, burden. I've been thinking about it a lot. 8 months ago, the Sunday calls stopped being about how I was doing and started being about money. Subtle at first. My daughter-in-law mentioning the cost of daycare for my granddaughter. My son saying work had been slow. Me offering to help here and there. A few $100s, groceries, a car repair. I was glad to do it. That's what you do for family. Then it got less subtle. "Dad, have you thought about what you're going to do with the house?" This was 6 months ago, sitting on my back porch. My son said it like it was a casual question, like he was asking about the weather. I said, "I'm going to keep living in it." He nodded, but his eyes went somewhere else for a second. Somewhere that had nothing to do with my comfort. 4 months ago, my daughter-in-law started coming along on the Sunday visits. That should have been nice. It wasn't. She'd walk through the house with this particular kind of attention, not admiring it, assessing it. She'd run her hand along the kitchen counter and mention that the tile was outdated. She'd look at the workshop in the back and say, "All that space just sitting there." Patricia picked out that tile. The little terracotta squares with the hand-painted blue diamonds along the border. We drove to a specialty shop in Dallas to find them. Patricia said they reminded her of the houses she'd seen in Santa Fe on our anniversary trip in 2004. I was not about to let someone call them outdated without feeling something shift in my chest. But I said nothing, kept the peace. 3 months ago, my son sat me down at that same kitchen table and laid out what he called a plan. His daughter needed a better school district. My daughter-in-law's commute was killing her. If they could sell their place in Frisco and consolidate, his word, consolidate, into my house, they could get stable, get ahead, and I could move somewhere smaller, somewhere appropriate for my stage of life. Stage of life. I asked him what stage that was exactly. He said, "You know, Pop, somewhere you'd have support around you, people your age, activities." I'm 68. I still change my own breaker boxes, I grow tomatoes, I drove myself to my last cardiologist appointment and walked out with a clean bill of health. But I didn't say any of that. I said I'd think about it. Here's what I didn't tell him. That night after he left, I went to my workshop. Patricia and I had a thing where, when either of us had a problem we couldn't solve, we'd go sit in the workshop. I don't know why it worked. Something about the smell of sawdust and motor oil. Something about being surrounded by things you made with your own hands. Patricia would sit on the old stool by the window and I'd stand at the workbench and we'd just talk until things made sense. She wasn't there anymore, but I went anyway. I sat at my workbench and I thought about what my son had said. I thought about the way my daughter-in-law had nodded through the whole conversation, the small, satisfied nod of someone watching a plan come together. and I thought about my older brother Roy. Roy, who died 6 years ago, who spent the last 4 years of his life in a facility in Lubbock that smelled like industrial cleaner and cafeteria food. Roy, who told me 2 weeks before he died, "Gene, don't let them do to you what they did to me." I'd thought he meant the illness. I wasn't so sure now. I opened the bottom drawer of my workbench. It's where I keep things I don't need but can't throw away. Patricia's garden gloves. A photo of the two of us at Barton Springs in 1998. A small digital recorder, one of those cheap ones, a Zoom H1N that I'd bought 4 years ago to record the sounds in my workshop. I had this idea once of making videos of the furniture I build, little documentaries of the process. I never did anything with it. I picked it up, changed the batteries, pressed record, said my own name out loud, played it back, clear as a bell. I put it back in the drawer and went to bed, but I lay awake for a long time. Over the next 6 weeks, the pressure didn't let up, it got organized. My daughter-in-law found a place. Sunridge Senior Living. She brought a brochure, full color, thick paper, photos of smiling people playing cards and doing water aerobics. She left it on my coffee table one Sunday like a magazine you just happened to be reading. I picked it up. Monthly fees started at $4,200. My pension and Social Security come to about $2,800. My daughter-in-law had already penciled in a note in the margin. Sell house to cover gap. I didn't react. I folded the brochure and set it back on the table. That was the week I started keeping the recorder in my shirt pocket. I don't know exactly when I decided to do it. I don't think it was one moment. It was more like a slow, cold accumulation, like ice building up on a windshield. Each conversation, each Sunday visit, each time my son mentioned my situation or my daughter-in-law talked about next steps, I felt it thicken. And I thought about Roy. And I thought about Patricia, who used to say, "Eugene Perkins, you are the least confrontational man I have ever loved, and one day that is going to cost you something you cannot afford to lose." She was right. She usually was. So I listened, and I recorded. The first time I captured something significant was a Sunday in late February. My son and daughter-in-law had come for lunch. I'd made chili, Patricia's recipe, the one with 2 kinds of beans and a spoonful of cocoa powder. She swore no one would notice, but everyone did. I set the recorder in the breast pocket of my flannel shirt already running, and I sat down to eat. After lunch, my daughter-in-law cleared her throat and said she'd been talking to an estate attorney, just to understand the options, just to be informed. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a document about something called a life estate deed. If I signed, I would transfer ownership of the house to my son while retaining the right to live there temporarily. "It protects you," she said, "from estate taxes, for when the time comes." My son didn't look at me, he looked at the folder. I picked it up, looked at it for a moment, set it back down. "I'll think about it," I said. My daughter-in-law's smile flickered. "We just don't want you to be caught off guard by probate," she said. "It can be very difficult." That night after they left, I played back the recording. Heard my own voice, quiet and careful. Heard her voice, smooth and reasonable. Heard my son saying almost nothing. That silence of his, I realized, was its own kind of answer. He knew what she was doing, he just didn't want to be the one doing it. I made a phone call that night. To a man named Clifford Beaumont. Judge Clifford Beaumont, retired, who I'd known since 1987 when we were both in the same bowling league in Mesquite. Cliff is 72 now, still sharp, still blunt. He picked up on the second ring. "Cliff," I said, "I need your opinion on something." He listened while I explained. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Then, Eugene, you bring me those documents and a copy of whatever you've got on that recorder. It's not a lot yet. Keep recording. I feel like I'm spying on my own family." Another pause. "You feel like a man protecting himself from people who have already decided what to do with him. That's different." I kept recording. The Sunridge brochure was replaced by a second one, then a third, different facilities, different price points, all of them conveniently located far enough away that dropping by would require planning. My son started stopping by alone sometimes without my daughter-in-law. Those visits were different, softer. He'd sit in Patricia's chair and look at her photo on the mantel and talk about how hard everything had been since she died, how the grief had affected the whole family, how he just wanted everyone, meaning me, to be settled. I understood then what was happening. He was the soft sell, she was the hard sell. They divided the labor. One night about 6 weeks into the recording, my son came by late. He'd had a few drinks, not fall-down drunk, but loose. He sat at the kitchen table and looked at me with this complicated expression that I hadn't seen on his face in years, not since he was a teenager and had done something, didn't know how to say it. "Pop," he said. "You know it's not about the money, right?" I waited. Laura thinks," he stopped. That was the first time he'd admitted that the plan was more his wife's than his. "She says we can't keep carrying this anxiety about you being here alone." Something could happen. Has anything happened? He looked at the table. Not yet. Then we're talking about something that might happen. He rubbed his face. She's got spreadsheets, Pop. Laura's got spreadsheets. The house value, the facility costs, the gap, the timeline. She's been planning this for a year. Patricia had been gone 14 months. I kept my face still. I appreciate you telling me, I said. I need to think. He nodded, relieved to have said it, and left. I went to the workshop. The recorder was already running, had been since he knocked on the door. I sat at my workbench and played the whole conversation back. Heard him say her name. Heard a year. Heard the exhaustion in his voice, the guilt he hadn't quite earned the right to feel yet. I called Cliff the next morning, told him what I had. It's time, he said. Not yet, I said. I want to do this right. What does right look like to you? I thought about Patricia. About her good china still in the cabinet. About the terracotta tile she drove to Dallas to find. About the workshop with 30 years of sawdust in the corners. About Roy in Lubbock, telling me not to let them. Right looks like the truth being told at my own kitchen table, I said. With witnesses. Cliff was quiet. Then all right, Eugene, you tell me when. Thursday came. 3 weeks later, my son and daughter-in-law arrived together. My daughter-in-law was carrying the folder again. The same one, updated, with a new cover sheet from the estate attorney and a sticky note marking where I should sign. She set it on the kitchen counter with the pen on top and smiled. We thought we'd make a day of it, she said. Sign the paperwork, then go look at Sunridge together. They have a lovely dining room. We made an appointment. My son stood near the door with his hands in his pockets. I looked at the folder, looked at the pen, looked at my daughter-in-law's bright, certain face. I'll think about it overnight, I said. Her smile thinned. Dad, we've been thinking about this for months. The attorney needs the documents by Monday, I said again. The same words, the same tone. She looked at my son. He looked at his shoes. They left unhappy. But they'd be back Saturday morning. My daughter-in-law had said as much, something about finalizing things over breakfast. She'd even offered to bring pastries. I called Cliff the moment their car left the driveway. Saturday morning, I said. 8 o'clock. I'll be there. A pause. You need anyone else? I thought for a moment. My neighbor across the street, a man named Walt Greer, retired sheriff's deputy, known him 12 years. And a woman from my church named Rosaline Chambers, who happens to be a family law attorney. I'll make some calls, I said. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening to the house settle and thought about Patricia. About the way she used to say that silence wasn't the same as peace, and that keeping quiet to spare someone else's discomfort was just another way of disrespecting yourself. I'd gotten good at disrespecting myself these past 14 months. Telling myself it was love, telling myself it was patience. At 3 in the morning, I got up and went to the kitchen. I stood at the counter where the folder sat with the pen on top. I picked up the pen, turned it over in my hands, set it back down. Then I put on coffee and started planning a breakfast. By 5:30, the kitchen smelled like Patricia's house on a Sunday. Eggs, sausage links, fresh biscuits from scratch, the good coffee, the dark roast we only used for company. I found her tablecloth in the linen drawer, the cream-colored one with the embroidered edges she saved for holidays. I put it on the dining room table. I found her good dishes. White with a thin blue rim, simple and serious, and set 4 places, not 2, 4. I showered, shaved, put on my church clothes. My dress slacks, my button-down, my VFW lapel pin. I served 2 years in the army, 1977 to 1979, nothing dramatic. But I earned that pin and I wear it when I need to remind myself who I am. I looked in the bathroom mirror, 68 years old. Steady hands, clear eyes, and a recorder in my breast pocket with 11 weeks of Sunday conversations on it. At 7:45, I heard a car pull into the driveway next door, Cliff's Buick. He came to the door in a dark jacket, reading glasses in his shirt pocket, the quiet authority of a man who spent 22 years on the bench. He looked at me for a moment, then put a hand on my shoulder. You doing all right, he said. Getting there, I said. Walt came next, big and quiet in his flannel shirt, saying nothing, just nodding. Then Rosalind, briefcase in hand, who shook my hand and sat down at the dining room table and opened a legal pad without being asked. I told them where to sit. I explained what was going to happen. They listened. We waited. At 8:12, I heard the crunch of tires in the driveway. 2 doors, footsteps on the front walk, the doorbell. I went to the door. My son and daughter-in-law stood on the porch. My daughter-in-law was carrying a white pastry box from a bakery in Frisco, tied with a ribbon. She was already smiling, the bright, done-deal smile of a woman who had decided the morning's outcome before she left the house. Morning, Dad, she said and stepped inside like she lived there. My son followed, quieter. His eyes found mine for a second, and something in his face, some small part of him, already knew. I led them toward the dining room. My daughter-in-law stopped in the doorway. She saw the table, the tablecloth, the good dishes, the four-place settings, the food still steaming. She saw the chairs arranged differently than normal, and then she saw the people sitting in them. Her smile didn't fall all at once, it went in stages, like a building coming down floor by floor. What? She turned to me. Who are these people? My son had gone very still. You know Cliff, I said. Cliff raised a hand from his chair. And this is Walt. He was a deputy sheriff for 20 years, and this is Rosalind Chambers. She's a family law attorney. The pastry box lowered in my daughter-in-law's hands. Dad, my son said, his voice careful, what is this? I walked to the head of the table and sat down. I picked up my coffee cup. Everyone was watching me. Sit down, I said. Both of you, I made breakfast. They sat. My daughter-in-law put the pastry box on the table. She was looking at Rosalind. Rosalind was writing on her legal pad, calm and unhurried. My son reached toward the biscuits, old reflex. He stopped himself. I reached into my breast pocket and set the recorder on the table. My daughter-in-law's eyes went to it immediately. Something in her face changed, an understanding passing through it like a shadow. What is that? She said. It's a recorder, I said. I've been using it since February. Silent. Texas is a one-party consent state, Rosalind said, without looking up from her legal pad. He has the legal right to record any conversation he is a party to in his own home. My daughter-in-law opened her mouth, closed it. I pressed play. Her own voice came out of the small speaker, smooth and reasonable. It protects you from estate taxes, for when the time comes. I stopped it. My son had put his biscuit down. He was looking at the table. I played the next clip, a Sunday visit 6 weeks ago. My daughter-in-law's voice, the market's strong right now and a house this size in Garland. You'd be surprised what it could bring. More than enough to cover Sunridge for years. And then from the same recording, my son's voice quiet, Pop's not going to go for this easily. And her voice patient, certain he will. He just needs time to get used to the idea. I stopped the recorder. The room was very quiet. My son's face had gone the color of old concrete. He was staring at the center of the table like he was reading something written there. My daughter-in-law looked at Rosalind, then at Cliff, then at me. You've been recording us for months. Her voice was different now. Flat. 11 weeks, I said. That's she stopped. Started again. I was trying to help. We were trying to help. You're alone here. You're getting older. We were worried. Were you worried? I said, or were you planning? She didn't answer. I looked at my son then, really looked at him. He was still staring at the table. His jaw was tight, his hands folded in front of him. He looked like a man trying to decide something, or like a man who had already decided and hadn't worked up the courage to act on it yet. You told me she'd been planning this for a year, I said. You came here a few weeks ago after you'd had a couple drinks and you told me her name and you told me a year. He looked up. His eyes were wet, not my daughter-in-law's eyes. Hers were dry, calculating, but his. Pop, I'm not angry at you, I said. And I meant it, which surprised me. I'm not, but I needed you to understand what was happening. Rosalind cleared her throat. I've reviewed the documents your daughter-in-law brought previously, she said, addressing both of them. The life estate deed, the facility placement materials, the estate attorney's correspondence. It's my professional opinion that if Mr. Perkins had signed the deed as presented, he would have significantly compromised his property rights and his ability to make future financial decisions independently. I want that to be understood clearly. My daughter-in-law said very carefully, we were acting in his best interest. With respect, Rosalind said, not unkindly but not gently either. That's not a determination you get to make for a competent adult who owns his own home. Walt, who had said nothing this entire time, set down his coffee cup with a small, deliberate sound. He looked at my daughter-in-law with the patient, expressionless look of a man who has heard a great many explanations for things that didn't need explaining. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. My daughter-in-law stood up. I think we should go. You haven't eaten, I said. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't sarcasm. I meant it. And the sincerity of it seemed to catch her off guard. She sat back down. We sat there together, the five of us, for a long and uncomfortable moment. Then my son reached for a biscuit. He broke it open. Steam came out. He looked at me across the table. I'm sorry, Pop, he said. His voice cracked on the second word. I should have. I knew something wasn't right. I knew it and I didn't stop it, and I'm sorry. My daughter-in-law looked at her hands. The deed doesn't get signed, I said. The house stays in my name. The Sunridge folder goes in the recycling. And if that conversation needs to happen someday, if I genuinely need something different, I will be the one to start it. Do you understand? My son nodded, a single quiet nod. My daughter-in-law said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly, I know what you wanted, I said. I kept my voice even, and I need you to know that I know. That was the part that reached her, I think. Not anger, not accusation. Just the simple fact that I had seen clearly and would not pretend otherwise. Rosalind closed her legal pad. Cliff finished his coffee. Walt ate a sausage link and nodded once at me, something like approval in the nod. They left about an hour later. First Cliff and Walt and Rosalind, then my son and daughter-in-law. At the door, my son hugged me for the first time in months. Longer than usual. I hugged him back. My daughter-in-law said, "Take care of yourself, Dad," and I said I would, and I meant it. She didn't hug me. That was fine. I stood on my front porch and watched their car back out of the driveway and turn toward Frisco. The street was quiet. The neighbor's dog was barking at something down the block. The February sky over Garland was that flat white color it gets before weather comes in. I went back inside. Back to my kitchen, my terracotta tile Patricia's tablecloth still spread over the dining room table. There is a kind of loneliness that comes after a hard thing is resolved, not sadness exactly, but weight. I felt it then. I sat in Patricia's chair by the window for a while and let myself feel it. I thought about Roy. I thought about what it might have looked like if I'd signed that pen. A year from now, maybe two, somewhere with fluorescent lights and scheduled activity hours and strangers who called me by my first name without asking. I thought about the birdhouse. No, we didn't have a birdhouse. That was someone else's story. We had a workbench. We had 30 years of sawdust in the corners of a workshop that my son helped me insulate one summer when he was 15, complaining the whole time, and then proud of it after both of us standing back and looking at what we'd done. That workshop is still there. So is the house. I went out that evening and finished a small cabinet I'd been working on. Maple hand-jointed corners, a drawer that opened smooth and quiet. Patricia had wanted it for the entryway. I finished it for her anyway. My son called the next Sunday. We talked for 40 minutes. He told me he'd spoken to a marriage counselor, that he and his wife were going to work some things out. He didn't say much else about it. I didn't ask. He did say this near the end: "Pop, I thought I was protecting you. I don't know when I stopped asking you what you actually needed." I said, "You can start asking now." There's a lesson in what happened to me, and I'm not too proud to say it plainly. I spent 14 months being so careful not to be a burden that I nearly let myself become invisible. I stayed quiet to keep the peace, and I almost lost everything I had left of a life that Patricia and I built together, block by block, year by year, with our own hands. If someone in your life is making plans for you without consulting you, that is not care, that is control, and there is a difference worth protecting. I still sleep in my own bed. I still make coffee in my own kitchen. I still go out to my workshop when I have a problem I can't solve, and I sit at my workbench, and sometimes I talk to Patricia, and sometimes I just listen to the way the house sounds when it's quiet and entirely mine. That is enough. That is everything.